These days, it is harder and harder to find the perfect spot for growing fruit trees. You may have a yard with access to full sun, and that's fantastic for most fruit trees. But often, the sticking point is really poor quality soil. In the cities, house construction and other disturbances can leave the soil really hard and lifeless. But in rural areas, things aren't always much better. Farmland is often overused and nutritionally bankrupt. So, as a result, many planting sites just don't have soil that's deep and rich enough to support fruit trees. So, how can we transform terrible soil into a welcoming home for fruit trees and other plants? Well, Paul Wheaton is my guest on the show today, and he's got some ideas. The magic lies in planting your trees and plants in something called, and this is a fun one to pronounce, Hugelkultur. Paul is a permaculture advocate, and you may already know him from his many YouTube videos and his homesteading forum at permies.com. So, Paul Wheaton, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Susan. I'm glad to be here.
I am so happy that you're here to talk about Hugelkultur. Have I said that right? Hugelkultur.
I first heard it pronounced Hugelkultur, and that seems to be how I hear it the most. I think when I first heard the word, I was attending a PDC and a permaculture design course, and we actually enjoyed the word so much. I remember we were hiking someplace, and we started all chanting Hugelkultur,
Mm.
as we were walking along. I don't know. It was weird. It was fun. We had fun.
It's fun. It's fun, and it's a bit Hugelkultur. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be able to say it good now. So I'm excited. So tell me a little bit about it. What exactly is it, and where does the term come from?
It is soil on wood. Emphasis on soil rather than dirt, but it's soil on wood, always heaped. And in fact, it comes from the German word, which means hill culture. So basically a raised bed garden. However, in the United States, it has evolved to have this meaning, and we're not sure how it got to this point of meaning that it's a raised bed that contains large pieces of wood, like logs or branches, things of that nature.
Okay, so it's this wood with soil bed. Um, why is this a thing? Like, why is it a good thing? What are the benefits?
The benefits are multifaceted. Um, for one thing, a lot of people are very keen these days on biochar, and biochar is excellent in a tropical climate. But when you come to a cooler climate, like where you and I are, um, hugelkultur is vastly superior, mostly just because you get all the benefits of biochar, but with like about a tenth of the effort. And so we just, take these big blocks of wood and we stick them inside of soil. And then boom, we've got all the benefits of biochar, and we didn't have to go through all that biochar process. So then, and the benefits of biochar and hugelkultur are that this matter inside of your raised bed is going to provide zillions of parking spaces for water and nutrients. So if you make your hugelkultur big enough, tall enough, you can eliminate the need to irrigate entirely. And so one very popular way to think about it is, rather than paying the neighbor kid to kill your garden while you're away, it'll be fine on its own. You don't need to involve the neighbor kid at all.
That sounds really good. Wow, to not have to water. I love, I do love gardening. I'm not a big fan of watering, even though I feel for my plants because I know they can't take nourishment out of the soil if they're not well hydrated. But luckily, I have a husband who does that. So that's what husbands are for. But anyways, so okay, so by putting the wood in, we are making parking spaces for water, for nutrients, maybe even for beneficial organisms. And that's definitely going to be good for the plants and trees. So let's say I have a backyard in my city and where I live, And I decide, okay, I'd like to test this out. How much space do I need and what would I do? What would be the steps involved in creating a little Hugelkultur garden?
So if you're living in town, the average lot is a quarter of an acre. And on that quarter of an acre, you got to have a house. So you're left with not very much space to work with. At the same time, a big ingredient they're going to work with, because when I build a hugelkultur, I build them taller than 7 feet tall. And I think that when you're in town, in fact, when I used to live in town, I built hugelkulturs, but I built them only 2 feet tall. And because I kind of felt like in my backyard, I might be able to do 4 or 5 feet and feel like I'm not going to get extra drama from my neighbors. But where I built my hugelkultur, the patch of sun that I had was in that little strip between the sidewalk and the street. And I felt like if I might be able to start off with 2 feet and in time augment it to get it up to maybe mound it in the middle to 3 feet, and nobody would, it wouldn't bring me any extra drama that I didn't want. I want to be a gardener and have a lovely day. I don't want to entice drama. And so I think when I talk about doing hugelkultur in an urban environment, the number one thing that people are concerned about is this drama factor. So because if you do it 7 feet tall or taller, then you can eliminate your irrigation needs. Whereas if you do it 3 feet tall, you have dramatically reduced your irrigation needs. You might only irrigate once a month instead of never. Um, so so that's the thing to keep in mind. So I would say that if it's in your backyard, I'd be a little bolder and go for 4 feet. But now here's the thing to keep in mind when you're trying to think about the size of the hugelkultur that you're about to build. If you build something that is, I'm going to say 5 feet tall, and it's got very steep sides, then the actual footprint on the horizontal ground is also about 5 feet. So if it's 20 feet long and it's 5 feet wide, and then it goes up 5 feet, the amount of real estate on each side is almost 5 feet, maybe even 5 feet, depending on how steep you make it. That means you just doubled your growing space. You now have 10 feet of space where you could plant. And for people living in an urban environment, so often we go and we plant all our gardens and our food forests and things of that nature. And it's like, I need more space. The seed catalog has seeds I haven't planted yet. The nursery has trees I need to buy and plant. I need more. And so this is the way to get more. So how tall should you make it? What are the dimensions? That's your question. And I'm saying the bigger, the better. The taller, the more planting space you have. But if you make something 10 feet tall, it could trigger odd reactions from your neighbors. On the other hand, if you place it
I
just right,
Mhm.
you might be deleting your neighbors in a sense, which
That's
could be
true.
a benefit.
With your Hugelkultur mountain. We've got an email here. Let's see, who's it from? From Ellen from Madison, Connecticut. Ellen, hi Susan, great show. Would love to be entered into the draw. Thanks for making this info available. We got a couple more. We've got a question here from Blaine. Blaine says, and Blaine is from Port Orchard, Washington. Just wanting to say, hey, I've listened to dozens of your recorded shows, but this is my first time listening live. Oh my gosh, that's great. I've got a 1-year-old food forest planted on hugel mounds on swales that I just inoculated with wine cap mushrooms to help speed up the breakdown of the logs. Are there other species of mushrooms I can inoculate into my hugel beds that are edible? Looking forward to the show. That's from Blaine. Ooh, good question. Okay, so any answers there about mushrooms?
I've been to Port Orchard, but okay, I don't want to talk about Port Orchard a whole bunch. And as much as I want to talk about mushrooms for the rest of the show, I feel like it's very, very important for me to address a thing that was mentioned in the question, and that is Hugels on swales. So I want to point out that a swale is a wonderful and terrific thing for a tropical climate. And I once recorded a podcast with Jeff Lawton, and he insisted that a swale is a terrific thing even in a cold climate. And then I recorded a podcast with him about a year later, and he said, you know, I said that, and I've had a year to think about it, and I've changed my mind. So let's just say so Jeff Lawton agrees with me on this point.
Okay, so
Now,
I'm just going to dive in here for 1 second. So we're talking about swales, which means little indentations where water can flow, right? So you've got your Hugelkultur little hills or big hills if you're you. But these swales are where the water goes a little bit lower, and you're saying it's not a good idea. Is your concern that the water will freeze and then damage plant roots? Is that what the problem is? What's the problem?
I'm not concerned about freeze. Now, of course, if we're going to talk about a swale, I don't think anybody's doing a swale in their backyard. So if
It
we're
could
gonna,
happen. It could
okay,
happen.
oh, fair enough. It could
Yeah,
happen.
something that I've been thinking of myself. So,
Really? Really?
yes,
Okay. Oh,
yes.
weird. I've never seen a swale in a backyard. Um, but you're right. It could happen. It would probably need to be a pretty big backyard, but but let's
Or
talk
a
about
small swale. But anyways,
let's
yes. So,
right.
right.
Generally, let's talk about what a swale generally is. It's basically a pond that is a long, skinny pond. It's a long, skinny, leaky pond. It's supposed to be leaky. And let's say a small swale in a rural environment might be 3 feet across and 100 feet long, and it's like a level ditch. It's built on contour. So and the idea is that the downhill side where you plant trees is intended to be very leaky. So if a bunch of water comes down the hill, it gets trapped in the swale. And so if you have like this gully washer rain event, it'll fill the swale, and then that water will slowly leak out over the next few days. It's slowing the water down, and then you create a water lens kind of downhill of the swale where those trees are planted, and that soil there will get very saturated. Now, here in a cold climate, there are people that have done gardening and built food forests, and they've made some boo-boos. And one of those boo-boos is that if you plant all your trees in this certain way, then it creates a frost pocket. And I want to point out that the way that you make a frost pocket is generally identical to the way that you make a swale. So a swale is going to be on contour. So all these trees are growing in a line. And if you've got a bunch of cold air coming down your slope, and a swale only to me makes sense on a slope. So you've got this cold air coming down the slope, it gets trapped by these trees all in a row. And so now you've increased the amount of frost. You have a shorter growing season right here.
Wow,
Now,
that's huge. That makes a big difference. It also means you could be more likely to get frost damage on the blossoms of your fruit trees if it's keeping that cold air.
that is so true. Now, I was asked to go and do a bunch of earthworks, teach an earthworks workshop years ago down in San Diego, but we were far enough away from the coast that we were in an area that got frost. So we built swales, and we built areas of hugelkultur because we wanted to take some areas and make them cooler all summer long. And we have reason, if you're in a hot area, there's a lot of reasons to do that. And swales are the answer. And we took areas and we made it so that they would be warmer all year long. And then that's going to be really good for where we want to plant things that are very frost sensitive. And they were in such an area that if we could just add 10 degrees all year long, they can grow a lot of extra stuff. And so they did. I think they planted a macadamia nut tree there. And so, all right,
Okay, so
Hugelkultur.
we've got the swales. That's a great discussion. So
A
now shall
lot
we
of
move
people,
to
a,
mushrooms?
a lot of
Oh,
people like to build their Hugelkultur on that downhill side of the swale, and it's on contour, and I just want to say that is a terrific idea in a tropical climate. The only problem is that hugelkultur in a tropical climate doesn't do so good, because all those woody bits on the inside tend to um, decompose very fast, which is why biochar is so good. Biochar will last 500 years, but you've got to prep the biochar, which is a big bunch of work. But here in a cold climate, that wood that you put on the inside will last 30 to 50 years, maybe longer. And if you've got brown cubicle rot, a type of fungus, and we're about to talk about funguses, it'll last 500 years. And for those of you that are asking, well, brown cubicle rot, what's that? Well, we're going to try and find some rotten wood to stick into our hugelkultur. But I imagine everybody who's listening has been for a walk out in the woods and they saw a stump that looks like it was made out of Legos. It was broken down into these little cubes, like millions of little cubes. That's brown cubicle rot. Ooh, that's some of the very best stuff to put into hugelkultur. It will last 500 years. All right, Susan, thank you for being patient with me.
you
You want
know
to,
me. I am patience personified. Not really, actually. I'm totally not patient. But anyways, you did a good job with that. So, okay, so now we're going to go on to mushrooms. Tell
I
us about
would,
mushrooms.
I would say you can plant things, but of course mushrooms get a little tricky. Um, if the wood is already rotten, then chances are a lot of different mycelium has already moved in which case it's there are challenges at getting mushrooms planted within it. So a
Oh,
lot of people,
competition, basically. They'll compete with each
yes.
other for that wood. Oh,
So
okay.
when you're trying to get, say, oyster mushrooms or shiitake mushrooms or something like that to grow, then a lot of times you're like, okay, I'm going to start with some green wood, and then I've got my spawn ready to go. I'm going to drill some holes into this green log I just cut, and I'm going to, plug those into those. Now set those aside in a shady spot, and I'm going to keep them wet. And so the question is like, hey, can I do this with hugelkultur? Well, I don't know about um, was it Port Orchard? Port Orchard, but I think in Port Orchard this will work because I know it works here. But every time I build a brand new hugelkultur, I am rewarded the following spring without doing anything. I'm rewarded with morels, and I don't know about everybody else, but morels are the best.
Wow, they're very expensive and fancy. So, oh my goodness. Okay.
I didn't
So,
do anything, and there they are. So build
and there they
hugelkultur so you can
are.
have morels.
Yes, that sounds pretty good. Um, got a couple more emails. Shall I have a look at those? Let's see what we've got. Hello, Susan and Paul. This is from Grace, listening to you from Little Rock, Arkansas. Interesting topic today. Is this something really new or has it been around for a while? Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
By the way, just so you know, we have 6 more emails. So we'll do a
Oh,
quick answer to that one.
um, I'm going to the perfectly correct answer is I don't know.
Oh,
Um, I know that in 2005, when I first heard the word, I went onto the internet and looked, and there was nothing on the internet, not a speck. And so I created the very first web page about hugelkultur.
oh, get
And
out. That's
so
amazing. Okay.
since then, I
And
have
what year
read
was that? What year
that,
was that?
that was 2005.
Oh, goodness.
And
Okay.
and after that, I was rereading Toby Hemingway's book, Gaia's Garden, and I found it mentioned in the first edition. And so, and it was a very tiny mention in there. So That's the earliest mention I've been able to find. Now, of course, if you talk to somebody from Germany, they're like, it's just hill culture. It's just raised bed gardens. People have been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay, this next one is from Lisa. This is Lisa in Nevada. Just wanted to say hi. Glad I got the dailyish,
Dailyish,
dailyish.
that's my email.
That's your email. Okay,
I
so you
love
guys
Lisa so much.
okay, so glad I got the whatever from Permies to listen in. Love everything Paul does. I have done some small hugelkultur in Kansas. After the third year, it just explodes. So don't get discouraged if it doesn't the first year. Wow, neat. Quick comment on Lisa's
Yes.
exploding garden.
And so the key is that hugelkultur is soil on wood. And a lot of times for a lot of us building hugelkultur, we're a little short on soil. We may even be short on wood. And we may even be short on good wood. And so it's like we build them with what we have, which is usually dirt or subsoil or something like that. And it's like, okay, so the general recipe is that you're going to build it and you're probably not going to have very good soil. So then we got to build soil because you're going to build the soil. And then once you have soil on wood, then it starts to rot and do its magic. Now I've seen people, I've seen hugelkulturs, I have heard from people, and they got the dirt, and then here's the general recipe that I want to state for the normal person who's not going to really think it through and do all the details, which is great. You're going to build it, you're going to plant it, you're going to irrigate it like a normal garden for the first year, then you're going to irrigate it half as much the second year. Now the soil's all built, and so for the third year and beyond, you don't have to irrigate it anymore. But for that first year, you irrigated it as part of your soil building process. So to get the magic, in this case, the magic comes the third year, provided that you did all of your irrigation steps
And
earlier.
that makes sense from the listener's email that, oops, all of a sudden it starts with not a lot going on and then boom, it explodes and the plants are happy. Okay, next we've got an email here from Grace from Cincinnati, Ohio. Hello, Susan. I have been re-listening to your podcast episodes from the beginning. Oh my gosh. And I am so grateful for this podcast. Thank you. A quick question for Paul. I recently heard that adding coarse wood chips to raised beds, I guess, lowers the nutrients when growing vegetables. Would hugelkultur likewise lower nutrients while it deteriorated in the soil? Grace, I love your question because I just want to say I've experienced this firsthand. When I was a new gardener, we had raised beds, and I cleverly, not really, mulched them with wood chips after planting my tomatoes. And I couldn't figure out why my tomato plants went yellow. And it turns out that later I understood that as they break down, maybe you can clarify, Paul, but wood chips actually take nitrogen out of the soil that the plants need. So can you comment on that?
Oh, yes. In fact, I'm so glad that the question was asked because this is so important. When we put wood inside, please use big wood. Please avoid using small wood. And so the thing that both you and Grace experienced is called nitrogen immobilization. And what it is that when you have soil and which has nitrogen in it, and then you have these wood chips or the sawdust or a small carbon thing, something where it has a lot of contact with the soil. It turns out, and I'm going to anthropomorphize nitrogen for a moment, that the nitrogen would prefer to do the compost dance with the carbon than to do the feed the plant dance. So that nitrogen gets locked up for a few years while it's playing with the carbon, and now all your plants turn yellow due to a lack of nitrogen immobilization. So when you have lots of wood chips or sawdust, Uncle Paul says that's a great mulch, but don't put it inside your hugelkultur. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you got a giant log, then the amount of soil to wood contact is low. But if you take that same piece of wood and pulverize it into a million pieces, the amount of soil to carbon or wood contact is very high. There's a lot more of that carbon touching all your nitrogens and locking them up. So you want to have big logs or big sticks. That's what you want to put on the inside.
Great. Let's do one more question before we have our little commercial break, and we got lots more to come. So this is going to be a listener question show because you guys have lots of great questions. Okay, this one is from Scott. Scott is from Owen Sound, Ontario. Hi, Susan. Loving your show and website. The first question I'll have for Paul, which he may be answering anyway, is this. Are there any species of wood or tree that are better than others to be used as the buried material in the Hugelkultur mound? That's from Scott.
The answer is yes. Now, I suppose that he'd like me to expand on that a bit.
If he doesn't want you to, I would request that, please. Thank you very much.
So, first of all, let's talk about what not to put inside of a hugelkultur. You wouldn't want to put black locust in there. It just doesn't break down. And that's what we want. We want rot. Black locust is 4% fungicide by weight, which is why it lasts so long. And so it is not going to be your friend inside of your hugelkultur. Another one is cedar. All conifers contain allelopathic agents, basically naturally occurring herbicides. That's why you go to a cedar grove or you'll go to a conifer forest and there's not much else growing there. And that's because the cedar has 4 different kinds of herbicides that it's kind of poisoning everything around it. This is like cedar only country here. We don't want anything growing here but cedar. So I don't want to put it inside of my hugelkultur because then it's going to basically be an herbicide for whatever else I plant there. Probably the very best is going to be cottonwood. Alder is good. There's a lot of those hardwoods that are actually softwoods, and those hardwoods that rot very fast. They can become punky really fast. Those are going to be really good. Now, for most of us, we don't get to pick what wood. And there's some people where they kind of get this thing of like, I'm going to build the best hugelkultur that's ever been built. I'm going to drive 200 miles to go get rotten wood. And it's like, oh, I think you lose all your fun points when you do that. And so, you know, what you use is what you have. Because like the beautiful thing about hugelkultur is right now, I imagine 80 to 90% of your listeners are like taking woody bits from their current horticultural endeavors and they're cutting them up into pieces so that it'll fit inside that green can that gets hauled away. And I'm kind of thinking like, and then they go out and they buy some kind of organic matter to put on their garden. And don't do that. Stop buying that stuff. It's garbage. And it's like, oh no, now you've got sponsors coming up. I hope I didn't just offend your sponsors. Okay, so the key is like you have this woody bit that you are thinking of hauling away, but that's gold to a gardener. That's organic matter, full of carbon, full of goodness for your garden. Don't take that gold away. You've raised this wonderful organic bit of gold. And it's like it wants to help you with all your projects. No, this is good stuff. You want to keep it. You want to do things with it. And never import organic matter. That's always a bad idea.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to sneak in one more little question, or it's a
Okay.
comment. This is from Jerry. Jerry says, hi, this is Jerry enjoying the show today. I'll be retiring next month and I can't wait to spend more time with my trees. Hi, Jerry. Nice to hear from you. All right. Well, I would love to go into more details about hugelkultur growing with you, Paul. And we'll do that in a few minutes, but I would love to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsors. Are you okay staying on the line and not flying away somewhere? Will you
I'm going to
stay
stay
with
right
us?
here. I've got
Yeah,
so much more to say.
I know you do. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, great. So you'll stay on the line. Thanks, everybody. You're listening to the Urban Forestry Radio Show and Podcast brought to you by the Fruit Tree Care Training website, orchardpeople.com. This is Reality Radio 101, and I'm Susan Poizner, author of the Fruit Tree Care books, Growing Urban Orchards and Grow Fruit Trees Fast. And we're going to be back right after this break. Okay, Paul, let's field a few more listener questions. We have so many good questions today. This one is from Ellen. Oh, Ellen again. We heard from her earlier. Ellen says, "Hi, Susan. I'm growing a lapin cherry on a 4-foot high berm mound. We get occasional flooding from a low salt, brackish salt marsh, hence the berm. It has survived 3 years in the berm and it's doing very well. Can I transform my berm into a Hugelkultur by digging in logs and green matter and compost?" Ellen, wonderful question. I was kind of thinking that myself. So tell us, Paul, what do you think?
So, an odd thing happens is like, so I have a book I wrote a few years ago, and I thought, everybody who reads the book is going to enjoy this part and this part and this part, the Hugel culture. But the weird thing is that I talked about people trying to grow. I had like a page dedicated to how to grow a better lawn organically with less care. And in it, I introduced this idea of you can drill a hole in the ground that goes 3 feet deep. And then in the hole, you're going to put a couple of sticks. You're going to put some kitchen scraps and some of the dirt that you took out. And then you're going to put a little bit more dirt and a couple more sticks. And so basically, you're going to refill this hole. And I call it a worm town. And I explain earthworms are your friends and they need a place to go dormant for the winter. And so you need to make a place for them to live. But even more than that, if you make one of these every 3 to 5 feet throughout your yard, then eventually your whole yard will get greener just because of the worms moving back and forth between the worm towns. And we've had so many people do this and had great success. So the answer is basically, yeah, make a worm town. And I got one really important thing. And whenever you're building a Hugel culture, I want everybody to do this as well. But if you're going to make a worm town in your berm, and you dig this hole out that's 3 feet deep and maybe a foot across or something, and you're refilling it with a stick, and now here's some kitchen scraps and another stick, and the one thing that I want you to put in there is to go to your best soil, your garden or wherever your soil is the very best, and to dig up a blob of that's about the size of a basketball. Do you have basketballs in Canada?
Yes, we do. Believe it or not, we actually do.
Okay, the size of a basketball.
Yeah.
And now the important thing is to keep it together. Don't let it break up. Hold it together. And you're going to put this into your Hugel culture or into your worm town as a contiguous basketball that never got broken. So the thing is that inside your best sample of soil, there's all this life and there's worms and there's all kinds of stuff going on in there. But if it breaks up, it dies. And we want to keep it all, so keep it together as best as you can and transplant this. And I call this a soil seed. So you're going to take this basketball-sized seed and you got to hold it together and transplant it into its new home where it's going to expand and grow. It has all this beautiful life in it that's going to expand. So that's part of what you're going to refill this hole with. And you're going to end up with more. It's going to end up being a little bit mounded, but as everything breaks down in time, your mound is going to come back to ground level. So I think this kind of helps paint a picture of how to add organic matter to a place where because you don't want to dig up that tree, you'll make the tree sad. So don't do that.
We don't want sad trees. That's brilliant. By the way, I have a previous episode on vertical mulching, which is something that arborists are now doing, where they are making these holes a certain, and they're filling it with, I don't know, compost and actual worms. They get the worms, they pot them in there, and it works. So that's a different episode. If people want to listen to that vertical mulching episode, I think that will dovetail in really nicely. Okay, we have about 10 more questions. So let's keep going through. Oh my gosh. I don't get any time for my questions, but that's fine because people are asking better questions than the ones I had planned. So there you go. Next one is, another quick one from Ellen. Follow-up question. Does the Hugelkultur slowly sink as a result of the wood decomposing underneath? Ooh, good question.
Now, after I built a bunch of Hugelkultur, I got to meet my hero, Sepp Holzer, who is famous for being the most Hugelkultur guy in the world. And he doesn't speak a lick of English, and I don't speak a lick of German, but he adamantly insists that they never shrink, never. And I insist that they do. They do. They get shorter over time, and I think that if it lasts 50 years, it'll be half the height of where you started. But now the soil will be incredibly rich. And on top of that, there's ways to kind of augment the top as the years go on so that it just goes up and up and up and up. But yes, I believe it will shrink.
Okay, and now we've got Olivia from Brooklyn, New York. Hi, Susan and guest. This is fun. Apologies if I missed it, but where is your guest from? And how did they get familiar with Hugelkultur? And where do you suggest getting your wood from? That's from Olivia. Tell us
Oh,
about yourself. I didn't let you tell us about yourself.
well, I know that like the Garden Master program that you are giving away, that is because in 1996, I took the Master Gardener program here in Missoula, and I visited with people to learn that what I took was vastly superior to any other Master Gardener program. But and my instructor is a market gardener and very passionate about organic and beyond organic. And for a few people, I'll throw this name out and let's see if you recognize it. She was an intern for Masanobu Fukuoka. And so, oh, look, Susan knows that name.
Familiar, yes,
Yes.
yes.
And so uh, she is bonkers about Fukuoka's techniques, and she has expanded on them. And she has so much, for 17 years, she taught the Master Gardener program. And but the leash that you're on when you teach that is got tighter and tighter and tighter with every passing year, and so she dropped it. And then I invited her back to teach the same course, but to throw out all the herbicide and pesticide stuff and replace it with permaculture and Fukuoka and uh, food forests, commercial food forests, uh, all of these kinds of things that we love, market gardening. So this course is the Master Gardener course dramatically upgraded. And
And this is what we're sharing as part of this prize today, right? This is what people,
yeah,
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's
yes,
great.
yes, it is. She is a glorious teacher, just absolutely magnificent. So, all right, you asked me a question like, where do I come from? And
Oh,
it's like,
and where can people find you? Because we've got a few more questions to go. So most importantly, how can people find out more about all of your educational offerings?
well, if you go to permies.com, that's kind of the jumping off point for 1,000 things. And we have a community that's made of 300,000 people. We get 1.8 million visitors per month. So we have a very active forum, very active community, very keen on permaculture and homesteading. And really all of the permaculture and homesteading starts with gardening. And so we have, I believe, 300 forums right now. And so for everything. It all starts by going to permies.com. So
Awesome. Okay.
I am in Montana, and this is where I started. I grew a garden, and my first attempt ever at growing a garden, everything died. Everything. I think I got a couple of potatoes that were like the size of a quarter, and that was it. Um, I felt so bad that these poor seeds were so unfortunate to land in my hand. Clearly did not have a green thumb. So I read more than 100 gardening books that next year and had a much better garden than that following year. So I didn't torture these poor things like I did the first year.
Oh,
Um, so as opposed to people who grow a glorious garden and they don't know how, I couldn't do that. I had to learn how. And I have shared a lot of that. And so I'm able to talk about these things. And over the years, I got excited about, in fact, with Hugelkultur, back in those original days when I was taking the master gardening course that was so good, um, I had this idea that I wanted to water my garden less. And I knew that by creating organic matter in my raised bed gardens, that that would help with that. But I wanted to go so much farther. And when I found out about hugelkultur, it's like, this is the thing that I was looking for all of my life. And I can't help but think that everybody who's listening right now, that their gardening adventure will be 10 times more delicious with hugelkultur, and it'll be the cornerstone of everything you do from here on out.
mm,
It is just, it's right up there. I would say the only thing that's better than hugelkultur is mulch. And it's like, and we use mulch on hugelkultur as well.
to get two
Um,
for one, two for.
yeah.
Okay, let's go through a few more quick emails. We've only got 10 minutes left of the show. Where is the show gone? Oh my goodness. Okay. Brandon writes, hello, first time live. I just wanted to be put into the raffle and to say hi. Hi, Brandon. Would you like to say hi to Brandon?
Hi,
We have a,
Brandon.
okay, next one. Whoops, I just popped into, hopefully I didn't miss one. Nancy writes, hello, Susan and Paul. My name is Nancy. I live in Yakima, Washington. Today I'm working in my garden while listening live to the show for the first time. I am having a poplar tree cut down today and was wondering, I have an older hugel mound that has shrunk. Can I add height to it by layering my poplar wood and branches along with new soil on top of the existing hugel mound? Thanks, Nancy. What a good question.
Oh yeah, and that's Nancy in Yakima, Washington.
Yakima. Why? What is it actually called? Now I'm
Well,
embarrassed.
I think you just said Yakima, and I
Oh,
thought I have
Yakima.
never heard it pronounced that way.
Paul, didn't you
But you
know the
are
name has been officially changed? You're just not up to date on that.
so, Nancy, I love where you're going with this. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're doing that, because your idea is brilliant, and now since this is a show about trees, then one concern that I have is that if you're growing trees on there and you augment your hugelkultur, you take it from where it's maybe 2 feet tall now and you're like, I'm going to make it 7 feet tall with brand new stuff. The problem with that is that if the roots of your existing trees are in there and they are happy being 6 inches from the surface, and you suddenly make those roots be 7 feet from the surface, they're going to be sad, and we don't want that. And so, on the other hand, if there's nothing growing there, oh, yes, what you propose is wonderful and delicious and delightful and amazing. And on top of that, poplar is an amazing wood to use instead of just make sure it's very dead and dry. Uh, Otherwise, you might have a lot of poplar trees.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Good thing to think about. Now, I'm just going to ask Gary in the studio. Gary, can you come on the line just for a second? If we go over time just a wee bit, what's going to happen to Paul and I?
You're okay.
We're okay. Okay, because we have 6 more emails. Everybody's got such great questions. I just don't want to say, yeah. So you keep us posted, okay, Gary? And can I have lots of love from all the listeners for Gary in the studio who's being so kind to us?
Yay,
Yay for
Gary.
Gary. We love you, Gary.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
All
you.
right, let's go. Donald has a question. Hello, Donald here, sponsor of one of Paul's books. Quick question about evolving soil in urban areas. What kind of mix, in brackets, pioneer, nitrogen fixing, etc., would a person plant in a city property like a park or city hall or the police station?
I think I think Donald is suggesting guerrilla gardening. And so
Oh, is that what
if
it is? I wasn't exactly sure what was going on in that question. Okay, yeah.
if he has my book called Skip, inside of Skip, we have something called forage gardening. And the idea is that you might go to land that is unused, and maybe it's your own land, maybe it's not. And what kinds of seeds might you plant there to have to basically play the role of Gaia? You're going to go and grow glorious things all over the place. And so Donald's question is, and I gotta say, my favorite of all time of seeds to plant wherever and anywhere, my favorite is apple seeds, because every time you eat an apple, you get like 5 free seeds. And you could just tuck them into your pocket. And the next time you're someplace that looks like it's deficient in trees, then you can plant those seeds. And by then maybe you got a few more in your pocket. And only one seed out of 20 will actually make it for one reason or another. But it'll be a tree. It'll and on top of that, it will produce apples. Um, and more than half of the time, roughly about 80% of the time, they are actually quite tasty. They're a good apple. They're a delicious apple. About 20% of the time, they produce something that's referred to as a spitter. But it's still an apple tree, and the wildlife will still enjoy those spitters. And so, but you could come back later and have some delightful apples. And it's just that the variety of apple is going to be comical. It's not going to be something that's well documented, and that's fine. You'll have some great apples that just don't have a name yet.
Exactly. And maybe we can call them the Paul Wheaton apples. We can name them after you. We'll name our apples after you. Okay, let's keep going. We got Donald, right? Just to say
Yep.
hi, I would love to enter to win the Garden Master. Donald's from Washington. And we've got Dawn. Dawn says, good afternoon. Love the topic today. Only catching bits and pieces due to internet issues on my end. I'm sorry about that, Dawn. Dawn's from Michigan, and she's one of my students. Okay. Now we've got James who writes, hi, James. Hello from PNW.
Pacific Northwest.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello from PNW. Fun show. I'd like to enter the giveaway. That's from James. And coming up with the last one, actually, this is a miracle. We've got an email now from Derek. Greetings from southern Manitoba. First, for Paul's reference, basketball was invented by a Canadian. Aha.
I did not
And
know that.
thank you so much. I have somebody, Derek, thanks for being on my Canadian side. It's helping to stand up for the Canadian people. I didn't know that, if it's true. So Derek says, I too came to today's episode via the Daily Ish. I haven't fully come round to using Hugelkultur, but I have used Hugelkultur inspired practices on my properties. In the first case, we purchased raised beds for our small urban property and used a bunch of large wood as a base, topped by smaller branches, then topped by soil and compost. Okay. The second use was in creating small berms on the 3 acres we took back from a neighbor after an overspray incident into our small orchard. Oh boy. We laid out a line of logs in a pleasing to us pattern then covered it with soil. No question, but I wanted to get my name into the draw. That's from, I love that. But Derek, I really appreciate your email, not just for being Canadian and standing up for the Canadian basketball people, but also I love your description of, a lot of the listeners today will have small spaces, won't be able to build a huge mound, but the fact that we can actually integrate some of these principles into our existing raised beds or new plantings, whether it's 2 feet high or 3 feet high, I think really today's conversation is thought-provoking, and it's exciting to show the different opportunities that we have as growers to try different things. So, wow, it's time for the contest. We got to know who's going to win this contest because we have a lot of people who are entering. Are you ready? You ready,
I'm
Paul?
ready.
Because
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going to help. Oh, but first, I just want to thank some of the listeners. Every month, I have some wonderful listeners who write to me just to say hi. So I've got two Monicas that called me that emailed me this month. One of them is from Wisconsin, one I'm not sure from where. Mark from Colorado, Cindy from New Mexico, and also Jazz wrote me. Thank you, Jazz. Don't know where you're from. But I also got a really beautiful comment on the Orchard People Facebook page I wanted to share. It's from a listener called Steve, and Steve writes, I never catch the live show, but I am obsessed with the podcast and have made tree decisions based on your information. My favorite episode was the one on persimmons. I have 2 growing now. That was so nice. That made me feel really good. So, Steve, thank you so much for the comment. And if there's any other listeners out there who are really enjoying the show, I would love it if you guys could go to Apple Podcasts and submit a rating and review for this little podcast that not a lot of people know about. Then more people will come and find me, and I can do lots more shows for you guys. So that would be awesome. And thanks so much again, Steve. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was so fun. This was really fun.
Thanks for having me, Susan. This was great. I'm always glad to infect more brains with my silly ideas.
Well, that's fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much to Paul Wheaton from permies.com. And that's all for the show today, everybody. If you want to listen again or download other episodes, all you have to do is go to orchardpeople.com/podcasts. And you can learn more about growing fruit trees on orchardpeople.com, where I also have lots of articles and I have courses as well on fruit tree care. So that's all for now. I hope you guys will join me again next month when we are going to dig into another great topic. Bye for now, and I'll see you next time.